Welcome to the Culture of Healthcare, Privacy, Confidentiality, and Security. This is Lecture B. The component, the culture of healthcare, addresses job expectations in healthcare settings. It discusses how care is organized within a practice setting, privacy laws, and professional and ethical issues encountered in the workplace. The objectives of privacy, confidentiality, and security are to define and discern the differences between privacy, confidentiality, and security. Discuss the major methods for protecting privacy and confidentiality, including through the use of information technology. Describe and apply privacy, confidentiality, and security under the tenets of the HIPAA security rule. This lecture discusses concerns that people have about the security of health information. One of the ways to protect privacy is to make information more secure. A comprehensive overview is in the recent book, Information Security in Healthcare, Managing Risk by Herzig. So, what concerns do people have about security? The following slides will look at the many points of leakage in the system, some of the consequences of poor security, and the related topic of medical identity theft. It is important to remember that security is not unique to electronic systems. It is also an issue for paper systems. As anyone who works in a healthcare setting knows, there are many points where information can leak out of the system. This figure, adapted from Rindfleisch, shows how information flows through the healthcare system. Information is first generated in the provision of patient care by healthcare providers and clinics and hospitals. It then flows to healthcare support activity, such as payers of healthcare, the insurance companies that reimburse, quality reviews that measure the quality of care delivered, and other types of administration. There are also what Rindfleisch describes as social uses of information, everything from insurance eligibility to reporting to public health authorities and using data in medical research. Although it is regulated now by the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, more so than when this figure was published. There are also commercial uses of information, things like marketing, participating in managed care organizations that may use data for various purposes to try to improve the quality or efficiency of the care they deliver, and the monitoring of drug usage. There are many points along the way where information can leak out of the system. It is important to note that even though the concerns about privacy and security are heightened with electronic systems, paper records have their own set of privacy and security problems. In fact, some have argued that they may be more prone to breaches of security and disclosure. Unlike electronic systems, it is very difficult to audit the trail of a paper chart. It is not clear exactly where the chart goes and who has looked at it, unlike most electronic systems that record which login has looked at a particular piece of information. There are also issues with fax machines. Even in this electronic era, many still rely on fax machines to move information. When the paper comes out of fax machines and is put into a basket, anyone can view this document, and where this information goes is not always known. Records also continue to be photocopied. We photocopy for many reasons. The patient goes to a new provider. The insurance company needs to have documentation that a specific procedure was done or referral was made, and records get abstracted by individual people. Whether they are paper or electronic, records are also copied for research or quality assurance purposes. Most healthcare insurers belong to something called the Health Information Bureau, which monitors for insurance fraud. It has developed a huge database of individuals' healthcare claims, looking properly for health insurance fraud, but also collecting quite a bit of information on individuals' personal health. Aware of the consequences of poor security, Rindfleisch pointed out in the late 1990s that patients do various things to protect their security. They avoid seeking health care. They lie so things will not end up in their charts. Healthcare providers also have concerns about security, so they may avoid entering sensitive data that could be important in the care of a patient by others, and they may also devise workarounds to entering that information. A California Healthcare Foundation survey of healthcare consumers found that 13% engaged in activity that the foundation termed privacy protective activities that might put their health at risk, such as asking a doctor to leave out a diagnosis, perhaps to prevent someone from knowing that they have a certain diagnosis. Some also pay for tests out of pocket because they do not want to submit an insurance claim, knowing that when a claim is submitted, the insurance company then knows that the test was done. Others avoid seeing their regular doctor for some problems because they are trying to protect their privacy over some piece of information. A final security concern is medical identity theft. This is a growing concern, especially as more information is available electronically. With medical identity theft, the thief is using individually identifiable health information for obtaining access to property or services. When this happens, the victims are not only individuals whose medical records have been compromised, but also health providers, health plans, and society at large that pays for health care, resulting in many victims. The American Health Information Management Association, AHIMA, has determined that the value of medical identity information is much higher than the information accessed through identity theft, like a Social Security number. The Department of Health and Human Services has also addressed this problem and has developed a report that outlines various approaches to prevention, detection, and remediation of medical identity theft. The next slides will discuss tools for protecting health information. A good source to begin with is the Institute of Medicine IOM report that addresses issues of protecting electronic health information, entitled For the Record. It was commissioned by the National Library of Medicine and informed the HIPAA legislation. It also made recommendations on immediate and future best practices. While some of the content in the book is dated, the framework provides a good way of thinking about the problem. There are many different threats to security. There are insider threats, which may be accidental disclosure, or the curiosity of individuals working in an institution, or insubordination, where a disgruntled or dissatisfied employee accesses information inappropriately. The latter is probably the major cause of security breaches. There are certainly secondary settings. There are also threats that come from outside the institution, such as a hacker that accesses information over the Internet. This type of threat to security has received a lot of press, but there are actually relatively few examples. It is really insider threats that have proven to be more problematic. There are a variety of technologies that can be used to secure information. There are deterrents, which do not exclude people from breaching security, but give them pause for doing so, such as putting up alerts when, for example, an employee's medical record is about to be accessed. Another deterrent is the audit trail. There are also system management precautions that can be taken. It turns out that a number of software systems do not protect information as well as they should, and there should be some kind of analysis of vulnerability. Here are some obstacles that can prevent individuals from getting to private information. Authentication, such as having to use a password or other authentication. Authorization, where individuals have to be authorized to look at certain information. Integrity management, where the integrity of the overall system is assessed and maintained. Digital signatures, requiring a password or other type of digital process to ensure that an individual who is entering data is truly that individual. Encryption, which will be covered in the next two slides. Firewalls, that keep systems inaccessible from, say, the Internet. Rights management, such as restricting who can look at what aspects of different records. The next slides will discuss encryption. While encryption is necessary, it is not sufficient to ensure security. Any medical communication, whether it is an email or transmission of the medical record, should be encrypted over a public network, because anyone with the right know-how could intercept that information. What actually is encryption? In essence, it is when information is scrambled using a key, and then that key has to be used to unscramble it. There are different types of encryption. So-called symmetric encryption is when information is scrambled and unscrambled with the same key. Asymmetric encryption, sometimes called public key encryption, is where there is a different key for scrambling than for unscrambling the information. There are a number of important standards related to encryption and other functions that are listed on this slide. Not everyone in the informatics field needs to become an expert, but it is important to know what these standards are in different roles. For example, how they will be mandated by the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, high-tech criteria for the meaningful use of electronic health records. First, there is the encryption standard itself, the Advanced Encryption Standards, or AES, that has been designated by the National Institute for Standards and Technology, or NIST, as the standard for robust enough encryption and decryption to be used in computer systems for securing information such as health information. Of course, information is not just encrypted and decrypted on individual machines. It moves across networks, so the movement of data from point to point also requires a process that not only encrypts the data, but makes sure that it stays secure as it moves across those connections. The emerging standard is Transport Layer Security, or TLS, which succeeds a standard that was a very prominent route in the early days of the World Wide Web. The Secure Sockets Layer, or SSL. Of course, information moves according to a protocol, such as IP. So there is an Internet Protocol Security, or IPsec. This is part of the IP Internet Protocol Communications process that was developed for the new version of IP version 6, but it has actually been pulled from that version and added to version 4, which is what most people use when they connect to the Internet. In addition to making sure information is secure from one point to another across the network, the system needs to ensure the integrity of the information, that it has not been altered either due to transmission errors or for malicious reasons, where someone alters the information in transit. The Secure Hash Algorithms, or SHA, ensure the integrity of transmitted information documents. The original protocol was SHA, but it was found to have some security flaws, so SHA-2 has emerged now and is the more robust way of ensuring the integrity of transmitting information across networks. Wikipedia has a nice overview explanation of these standards, as does the NIST website, listed on this slide. For the record, lists a number of best practices divided into organizational and technical practices. Organizational practices include confidentiality, security policies and committees, education and training programs, and the all-important sanctions, so that when an individual is caught breaching security, he or she faces appropriate penalties. Patients also need to be given access to the audit trail, so they can see who has accessed their record, and then determine whether it has been done appropriately. Some of the technical best practices are authenticating users, having audit trails, using various forms of physical security and disaster recovery, protecting remote access points, having discipline in terms of the software development, and ongoing system vulnerability assessment. The latter two are quite important in terms of maintaining vigilance about security. The next slides will elaborate on authentication and passwords. Authentication is the process of gaining access to a secure computer. For example, logging onto a computer. The usual approach for authentication is the password, which is a piece of information that the computer user knows. With more secure systems, organizations may require information about a physical characteristic or what you have, such as a biometric device that registers thumbprints, or the use of a smart card, or some other physical key that enables the user to access the machine. In terms of passwords, the ideal password is one that can be remembered, but that no one else can guess. This is easier said than done, especially in today, when the typical Internet user may interact with many different sites, each of which requires the use of a password. In busy healthcare settings, there is what is called single sign-on, where the user only has to authenticate once and then has access into the other systems that they need. Of course, the downside to that is, if someone else is able to gain access through a user's sign-on, then that user's access points are now open to that other person. There are a number of challenges with passwords. One approach that is commonly used is password aging, so the password expires after a certain time, usually something like 6 months, in which case the individual has to create a new password. A number of security experts have written about password aging, and the major conclusion has been that this is not a good approach to security, and it may induce counterproductive behaviors, such as writing passwords down or somehow making them easier to guess. One report argues that other measures are more effective, things like session locking, that only allows one or a small number of simultaneous logons, so a user cannot log on to many different places at the same time. There are also login failure lockouts. After a certain number of unsuccessful attempts, the individual is locked out. but clearly passwords are going to be a continued issue in terms of keeping information secure, including health information. In the big picture of health information, security represents a trade-off. There is one end of the spectrum with no security, where a website will show the user any page requested, which is appropriate most of the time. On the other end of the spectrum, there is the level of security that is employed by some of the secretive government agencies like the CIA or the National Security Administration, NSA. Healthcare security cannot be at either of these extremes. It cannot be freely available to look at, but it also cannot achieve the kind of total security that the CIA or NSA can. For this level of security, there is a price. A person cannot, for example, bring an ordinary laptop into a CIA building. In healthcare settings, there can be many different people looking at information or needing to access it quickly in order to maintain the workflow and get the work done. For health information security, there has to be some kind of happy medium, where information is protected, but it is still easily accessible by those people for whom it is appropriate to look at. There needs to be a culture of protecting information, where assessing that information by appropriate people is not too onerous. We also know there is a need for ongoing research to improve security. The high-tech program funds 4 Strategic Healthcare IT Advanced Research Projects, SHARP. One of these projects is focused on security, called SHARPS, detailed on the website www.sharps.org. SHARPS is focused on security issues in 3 environments. These are 1. The Electronic Health Record, EHR. For example, self-protecting and privacy-aware systems. 2. Health Information Exchanges, HIEs, and Personal Health Records, PHRs, such as improved service models and access controls. 3. Telemedicine, for example, its devices, telecommunications, and so forth. This slide closes the general conversation on privacy, security, and confidentiality with a few general issues to ponder. Who owns information? When a healthcare provider creates information, puts it on a computer system that they own, or for that matter a piece of paper, who actually owns that information? Most would argue that the patient owns the information, although the medium is perhaps owned by others. When information is moved across systems, ownership of the information starts to blur. How informed consent best implemented to ensure that people really understand the issues and give truly informed consent? When does the public good exceed personal privacy? Should it be for public health measures, for medical research, for law enforcement? What conflicts are there with business interests when it comes to privacy and confidentiality? And finally, how will individuals be allowed to opt out of different systems? Should they be allowed to opt out of any specific piece of information, or should it be an all-or-nothing choice? If people are allowed to choose different options, what are the costs of each? And is it appropriate for healthcare providers to override those choices when access to vital patient information is necessary to provide the best medical care and/or to advocate for the common good? This concludes Lecture B of Privacy, Confidentiality, and Security. In summary, there are many points where private patient information can leak out of the healthcare system. There are also many technologies for protecting security that must be used. One of these, encryption, is necessary but not sufficient by itself. Finally, issues of privacy and security apply to both electronic and paper-based information.